When my Uber driver missed my stop, I thought he made a mistake. I leaned forward and told him he'd gone too far. But he didn't slow down. His voice was calm when he said, "I'm sorry. I have to take you somewhere first." At first, I thought he was joking. I pulled out my phone and said I'd report him. But then he did something that made my stomach drop. He handed me his phone and whispered, "Your wife just... You need to see this." The screen was glowing in the dim car light, showing a breaking news alert. I froze, unable to breathe. My wife's name was right there on the screen. That's when everything in my world stopped. My name is Daniel Ross. I'm 34 years old, a history teacher at a middle school in Philadelphia. I've been married to Hannah for 5 years. She's a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital, one of those people who can find calm even in chaos. She's the reason I started believing that good people still exist in the world. That night had started off so normal. I was at my younger brother Eli's apartment, watching the game, talking about work, and laughing over beers. Around 10, I decided to head home. It had started raining outside, a slow, steady drizzle that made the streets glisten under the yellow streetlights. Hannah had texted me an hour earlier. "Just got off my shift. Heading home soon." I smiled at the message, imagining her already in her pajamas, waiting for me on the couch with a blanket and that sleepy smile she always had after a long day. I didn't want to drive in the rain, so I called an Uber. Within a few minutes, a gray Toyota Camry pulled up. The driver rolled down his window slightly. "Daniel?" "Yeah," I said, confirming the plate number before getting in. He gave a small nod and said, "Good evening. I'm Ravi." He had a calm voice, polite, almost too quiet. The car smelled faintly of peppermint, and soft music played in the background, something instrumental. It felt safe, normal. I sat in the back seat scrolling through my phone as the rain pattered softly against the windows. The rhythm almost made me sleepy. For most of the drive, it was peaceful, just the hum of the tires and the occasional flash of headlights passing by. We were about 15 minutes from home when I realized something wasn't right. I glanced up and saw that we had passed my exit. My heart sank a little. I leaned forward. "Hey, I think you missed my turn." It was back there. He didn't answer right away. The windshield wipers moved back and forth, steady and loud. After a few seconds, he said quietly, "I know." I frowned. "Then why are you still driving?" He glanced at me in the mirror, his face half lit by the streetlights. "I have to take you somewhere first." The tone of his voice changed everything. It wasn't threatening, but it wasn't casual either. My body went tense. "What are you talking about?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "This isn't funny. Stop the car." He didn't slow down. "Please, just stay calm. I'm not trying to hurt you," he said softly. "Something happened, and I didn't know how else to tell you." The air inside the car felt heavier. My heart started racing, and my fingers tightened around my phone. "Tell me what's going on, or I'm calling the police." He didn't argue. Instead, he pulled the car over to the side of the road under a dim streetlight. The rain streaked across the windshield, the sound filling the silence between us. Then he turned to me, his face serious. "You need to see this." He handed me his phone. My first instinct was to push it away, but something in his eyes, worry, not aggression, made me take it. On the screen was a local emergency alert. My heart started pounding as I read it. Two-car collision reported near I-76 eastbound. Vehicle identified as blue Honda Civic registered to Hannah Ross. I felt my chest tighten. "No," I said quietly. "That's not possible." Ravi spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. "She was in an accident. They're rushing her to the hospital right now. I didn't want to just drop you off without telling you. You needed to know." I stared at him, frozen, trying to process his words. The rain kept falling, and the sound of it against the car roof suddenly felt like it was miles away. I tried to call Hannah, but the call went straight to voicemail. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. "Take me there," I said finally, my voice breaking. "Please, just take me to her." Ravi nodded and started the car again. The streetlights blurred through the rain as we sped toward the hospital. I sat there, gripping my phone, praying silently that she would answer. If this story has you wondering what happens next, make sure to subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Things were about to get much darker before the truth finally came out. The car sped through the rain-soaked streets, the wipers moving in frantic rhythm. Every sound, the rain, the tires, the soft thump of my heartbeat, felt painfully loud. I stared out the window, trying to focus on the passing lights, but all I could see was Hannah's smile in my mind. My throat felt tight, and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I kept telling myself it had to be a mistake. Maybe it was another car, someone else with the same name. But deep down, I knew. "Are you sure it was her car?" I asked, my voice trembling. Ravi glanced at me through the mirror, his eyes full of sympathy. The alert listed the plate number. It matched the one on your Uber account. I recognized it. Hearing that made the panic rush through me all over again. My breathing became uneven. She texted me an hour ago. She said she was heading home. How could this happen? Ravi didn't answer right away. He was focused on the road, his jaw tight, his hands gripping the steering wheel. "My wife works in emergency dispatch," he said after a moment. "She told me the crash was bad. They pulled 2 people out of the wreck. One of them was alive when they left." His words hit me like a punch. "One of them?" I repeated. "You mean there was someone else?" "Yes," he said quietly. "A man in another car. They don't know who he is yet." I turned my face toward the window, staring at the blurred city lights. Every part of me felt numb and on fire at the same time. I tried calling Eli, but he didn't answer. I called again and again, my fingers clumsy against the screen. When he finally picked up, his voice was hoarse. "Danny? Eli, what's going on? Is it true? Tell me it's not her." There was a long pause on the other end, just the sound of him breathing hard. "They're bringing her into the hospital now. You need to get here. They're saying it's serious." The words "it's serious" echoed in my head like an alarm. I pressed the phone to my forehead, my vision blurring. Ravi glanced back at me again. "We're close," he said. 10 more minutes. Those 10 minutes felt like a lifetime. The rain got heavier, blurring everything outside. Every red light felt like torture. I couldn't sit still. I kept gripping the seatbelt, running my hands through my hair, whispering to myself, "She's strong. She's fine. She has to be fine." Ravi's voice was steady, trying to keep me grounded. "Just breathe, okay? You'll be there soon. You can't help her if you fall apart." I nodded, trying to do what he said, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw Hannah's car. I pictured her driving home, tired from her shift, maybe humming along to the radio. Then I imagined headlights coming from the wrong direction, the sound of metal, the flash of fear in her eyes, and I couldn't breathe. We passed the intersection near the highway exit. Police cars were parked along the road, blue and red lights flashing through the rain. My heart jumped. "That's it, isn't it?" I whispered. Ravi nodded. "That's where it happened." I turned to look as we drove past. Through the rain, I saw 2 wrecked cars on the side of the road, both crushed at the front. One of them was blue, my wife's car. I felt the world tilt. "Stop the car!" I shouted, my voice breaking. Ravi slowed down, but a police officer waved him to keep moving. "You can't stop here," the officer yelled through the rain. I pressed my hands to my face, trying to hold myself together. "That's her car," I said, my voice shaking. "That's really her car." Ravi reached out, his voice calm but firm. "You need to get to the hospital. She's not here anymore. They took her already." I nodded numbly, sinking back into the seat. My body felt like it wasn't mine anymore. The drive to the hospital was silent after that. The city lights smeared across the windows like streaks of color, and every sound felt far away. I just kept thinking about all the small things I never said that morning before work. The way she kissed my cheek, how she smiled when I joked about making dinner that night. When we finally pulled up to St. Mary's, I could see the ambulance lights flashing by the entrance. The sight made my stomach twist. Ravi parked the car and turned to me. "Go," he said quietly. "I'll take care of the car." I didn't even respond. I pushed open the door and ran through the rain, slipping once on the slick pavement, but not stopping. My heart was pounding so hard, I could barely hear the sounds around me. Inside, the waiting room was crowded, full of noise and movement. I ran to the front desk, barely able to get the words out. Hannah Ross. Accident. I'm her husband. The nurse looked up, her eyes softening when she saw my face. She's in surgery, she said gently. The doctors are doing everything they can. You can wait in that room over there. I stood there, frozen for a moment, trying to understand what she was saying. Surgery. Everything they can. None of it sounded real. As I turned toward the waiting room, I saw Eli standing near the wall, soaked from the rain. His face was pale, his eyes red. When he saw me, he didn't say a word. He just walked over and pulled me into a hug. I broke down right there in his arms. All the fear, all the disbelief, all the helplessness came crashing out. I didn't care who was watching. My brother held me tighter and whispered, "She's still fighting, Danny. Don't give up yet." Those words were all I had left to hold on to. The waiting room felt like a different kind of prison, quiet but suffocating. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant, and the soft beeping of machines in the distance made my heart race every time I heard it. Eli and I sat side by side, both soaked from the rain, both staring at the same white wall like it might give us answers. I kept checking the clock on the far wall, watching the hands move painfully slow. Every passing minute felt heavier than the last. I had never felt so helpless in my life. I'm a teacher. I fix things with patience and calm. But there was no lesson plan for this. No way to predict the next moment. I wanted to burst into the operating room and see her, just to prove she was still there. Every time I tried to stand up, Eli would grab my arm. "You have to wait," he said quietly. "They'll come when they can." But waiting felt like torture. I looked down at my phone again. The last message from Hannah glowed on the screen. "Heading home soon. Can't wait to see you." It didn't even feel real anymore. I had typed 100 replies I couldn't send. I wanted to tell her I was sorry for not being there, for every small argument we ever had, for every time I took her patience for granted. Hours passed. The nurse at the desk gave us updates every so often. She was still in surgery. Her pulse was weak but steady. It wasn't much, but it kept me from falling apart. Around midnight, my mom arrived, her eyes red, her voice trembling as she hugged me. She didn't say anything at first. She just held me like she used to when I was a kid who'd had a nightmare. "She's strong," she whispered. "She's going to make it through this." Eli went to grab coffee while I stayed behind. That's when I saw him again. Ravi, the Uber driver. He was standing near the entrance, drenched from the rain, holding his phone nervously in both hands. When he noticed me, he hesitated before walking over. "I just wanted to make sure you got here," he said softly. I nodded, trying to find the right words. "You didn't have to stay." He gave a small, tired smile. I couldn't leave without knowing she was okay. Something about his calmness helped me breathe for the first time in hours. I looked at him, really looked. His clothes were soaked, his eyes heavy with worry. "You did more for me tonight than I can ever repay," I said. He shook his head. "Anyone would have done the same." I didn't believe that. Most people would have dropped me off and gone home. He chose to help, to carry a stranger's pain. It meant something I couldn't explain. Just then, the door to the operating room opened. A doctor stepped out, still in scrubs, his face serious. My heart stopped. Ravi stepped back quietly while I stood, my knees weak. The doctor's eyes met mine. "Mr. Ross?" "Yes," I said, barely able to speak. "She's still in critical condition, but we managed to stabilize her. The impact caused internal bleeding, and there's a fracture in her leg. We had to operate to stop the bleeding. The next 24 hours will be important." Relief flooded through me so fast I almost lost my balance. "So she's alive?" I asked, gripping the edge of the chair. He nodded. "Yes, she's alive." I let out a sound I didn't recognize, something between a laugh and a sob. I pressed my hands over my face as tears spilled out, and my mom wrapped her arms around me, crying too. For the first time that night, there was something to hold on to. After the doctor left, Ravi quietly approached again. "I'm glad she's safe," he said, his voice steady but gentle. I turned to him and said, "If you hadn't shown me that message, if you hadn't told me, I would have never gotten here in time." He looked down. "I think sometimes we end up in the right place for reasons we don't understand," He gave a small nod and left before I could say more. Watching him walk away, I realized how strange life could be, that a complete stranger could step into your life for a few hours and change it forever. Later that night, after things calmed down, I was finally allowed to see Hannah. The ICU lights were dim, machines humming softly beside her bed. She looked fragile, her face pale, a bandage across her forehead. Tubes and wires surrounded her, but she was breathing. I pulled a chair close and sat beside her, taking her hand gently. It was cold, but when I spoke, her fingers twitched slightly. "I'm here," I whispered. "You're going to be okay." I sat there for hours, watching the steady rise and fall of her chest, afraid to look away. Every few minutes, I'd whisper something. Memories, promises, anything to fill the silence. Around 3 a.m, Eli walked in with 2 cups of coffee. He handed me one and said quietly, "You look awful." I gave a weak smile. "Yeah, well, I earned it." He sat beside me, glancing at Hannah. "You really scared us tonight." "I scared myself," I admitted. "I thought I'd lost her. If it wasn't for that driver." Eli nodded slowly. "There are still good people out there." I looked at Hannah again and squeezed her hand. "Yeah, there are." And right then, I made a silent promise to never take a single ordinary moment for granted again. Morning sunlight filtered through the narrow blinds of the hospital window, painting thin golden lines across the floor. I hadn't moved from Hannah's side all night. The chair beneath me had molded to my exhaustion, and the untouched coffee beside me had long gone cold. But I couldn't leave her, watching her chest rise and fall, hearing the faint rhythm of the heart monitor. It was the only thing keeping me steady. Every so often, a nurse would come in to check her vitals, adjusting the IV or writing on her clipboard. They spoke softly, their voices like distant waves. Eli had fallen asleep in the waiting chair, head tilted against the wall. The world felt suspended, as if everything was waiting for Hannah to open her eyes. I held her hand gently, tracing my thumb over her skin. "You're safe," I whispered. "You made it through." Then, for the first time since the crash, her fingers moved. It was small, but I felt it. A twitch, a spark of life. I leaned forward instantly, my heart racing. Her lips parted slightly, and she let out a soft groan. "Hannah," I said, my voice shaking. "Hey, I'm here. It's me." Her eyelids fluttered open slowly. She blinked, dazed, her gaze unfocused. For a few seconds, she looked confused, like she was trying to piece together where she was. Her lips moved faintly. "Danny?" That single word broke something inside me. I swallowed hard and nodded quickly. "Yeah, it's me. You're okay. You're safe now." She blinked again, trying to gather strength. "What happened?" I hesitated, not wanting to scare her. "You were in an accident," I said gently, "but the doctors said you're going to recover. You've been asleep for a while." She frowned weakly. "Accident?" Her voice was hoarse, but she was alert now, her eyes scanning the room. "Where's my phone?" she asked softly. "I was calling you." I shook my head, tears welling up again. "I know. I tried calling too. I couldn't reach you." She closed her eyes for a moment, her breathing shallow. "I was on the highway," she said slowly. "I remember the lights. The car came out of nowhere." My heart clenched. "Do you remember anything else?" She nodded faintly, her voice trembling. "I was at a red light before the bridge. A truck was behind me, too close. I looked in the mirror and thought he'd hit me, but then he started flashing his lights." "What kind of truck?" I asked, leaning closer. "A delivery truck, I think," she said, her brow furrowing as she tried to recall. "He kept flashing his lights. I thought maybe something was wrong with my car, so I pulled over for a second. But when I stopped, he didn't. He drove past, fast. And then," her voice broke, "then another car came out of the lane next to me and hit me head on." I froze. "Someone hit you? From the other lane?" She nodded weakly. "It wasn't an accident, Danny. The car swerved toward me. For a moment, the room felt completely still. The words hung in the air like a storm about to break. "What do you mean it wasn't an accident?" I asked carefully. She blinked, tears forming at the corners of her eyes. "I saw the driver. He was looking right at me before it happened. He wasn't braking. He wasn't even trying to avoid me." My stomach twisted. "Did you recognize him?" She hesitated, her lips trembling. It was Mark. I froze completely. Mark? As in your ex-boyfriend? Mark? She nodded, a tear rolling down her cheek. He's been following me for weeks. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to scare you. He texted me after my last shift, saying he just wanted to talk. I ignored him, but I guess he found out where I worked. I sat back, my pulse pounding in my ears. The thought of someone intentionally hurting her made my blood run cold. He caused the crash? She nodded again, crying quietly. He came from the other lane. He hit me head on. I remember the look in his eyes before the impact. The door opened, and Officer Grant, the detective assigned to the case, stepped inside. She greeted me with a nod before turning to Hannah. Mrs. Ross, I'm glad to see you awake, she said gently. We have some updates. The man in the other car, the one who hit you, didn't survive. We identified him as Mark Pearson. I felt a wave of shock. Hannah gasped softly, covering her mouth with her free hand. The officer continued. We believe it was deliberate. Witnesses said his car crossed the center line without braking. We also found text messages on his phone sent minutes before the crash. Messages addressed to you. Hannah's hand gripped mine tightly. What did they say? Officer Grant looked at her with sympathy. He said he couldn't live without you, that if he couldn't have you, no one could. The silence that followed was unbearable. I looked at Hannah, her face pale, her tears soaking into the pillow. I wanted to say something comforting, but there were no words strong enough. After the officer left, I leaned closer to her. You're safe now, I said quietly. He can't hurt you anymore. She nodded slowly, tears still in her eyes. I thought I'd never see you again. I kissed her forehead and whispered, You will always see me again. I'm not going anywhere. The monitor beside her beeped steadily, filling the quiet room with a rhythm that sounded almost like hope. I sat there holding her hand, realizing that the worst night of our lives was ending with the one thing that mattered most. She was alive. For the first time since that drive began, I felt the weight lift from my chest. The fear, the anger, the guilt, all of it faded, replaced by something simpler, gratitude. I looked at her again and smiled through the tears. We're getting a second chance, I said softly, and I'm not wasting it. The days that followed were quiet, but heavy. Hospitals have a strange way of slowing time. Every morning began with the same sound, the beep of the monitors, the soft shuffle of nurses' shoes, the muted voices from the hallway. But with each sunrise, Hannah looked a little stronger. Her color returned, her voice steadied, and every small improvement felt like a miracle I didn't deserve, but would never take for granted. I spent nearly every hour in that hospital room. I'd grade a few student papers in the corner or grab coffee from the cafeteria, but I always came back to her side. Watching her heal became my entire world. She had surgery on her leg, and the doctors said it would take months of therapy before she could walk normally again. But she was alive, and that was more than enough. Eli came every evening after work, sometimes bringing our mom or food from home. They'd talk softly, trying to keep things light. Occasionally, the conversation would drift to Mark, the man who had caused it all, but I'd always change the subject. I didn't want his name taking up any more space in our lives. The police had closed the case, confirming what we already knew, that it had been intentional. It was over. But closure doesn't mean the fear disappears. For a while, Hannah would wake up in the middle of the night, gasping, her hand reaching for mine. I'd hold her until her breathing steadied, whispering, You're safe now. He's gone. Weeks later, she was released from the hospital. I remember the day vividly. It was sunny, one of those crisp spring mornings when the world feels like it's starting over. I wheeled her out to the car, and as soon as we stepped outside, she closed her eyes and took a deep breath. I forgot what fresh air smells like, she said with a small smile. I smiled back, though my throat tightened. That moment felt like a restart, like we were both learning how to live again. At home, I'd rearranged everything before she returned, moved her favorite chair near the window, stocked the kitchen with her favorite tea, even hung a new painting she'd been eyeing online. When she saw it, she smiled wider than she had in weeks. You did all this? She asked. Yeah, I said. I wanted it to feel new, Like the accident isn't the thing that defines us. For the first time since the crash, she laughed. A soft, shaky laugh that sounded more like her. That sound filled the house in a way silence never could. Over the next few months, we fell into a routine. I drove her to physical therapy twice a week, and in between, we took slow walks in the park. At first, she used crutches, but eventually she managed without them. Each step she took was a small victory, and every time she stumbled, I was there to steady her. The fear of losing her never fully left me, but it became something else. A reminder to live more deliberately, to appreciate the quiet moments that once went unnoticed. One afternoon, while we were sitting outside, Hannah said something I'll never forget. "You know," she began, "I used to think that surviving something like this would make me angry or bitter, but it didn't. It made me grateful. I think about that night, about how everything could have ended, and I realize how fragile everything really is. Life doesn't owe us time. We borrow it." I looked at her, sunlight catching her hair, and felt the truth of her words sink in. "We almost lost everything," I said, "but maybe that's what it takes sometimes, to see what really matters." She smiled faintly and reached for my hand. "I think we already knew," she said. "We just forgot to slow down long enough to notice." That night, I messaged Ravi, the Uber driver who'd changed everything. We'd exchanged numbers after the hospital, but I hadn't reached out until then. I thanked him again for what he did and told him Hannah was recovering. He replied a few minutes later, "I'm just glad I was there at the right time. Take care of her. People like her make the world better." His message stayed with me. There are people you meet for only a moment who end up shaping your entire life. Ravi was one of them. Months passed, and slowly, life began to resemble normal again. The nightmares faded. Hannah returned to work part-time, and I went back to teaching. Every morning before we left the house, I'd watch her tie her shoes, sip her coffee, and smile at me like she used to. It wasn't the same life we had before. It was better. It was quieter, slower, but fuller in ways that mattered more. One evening, we drove past the bridge where the accident happened. The road had been repaved, and there was nothing left to show what took place there. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then Hannah said softly, "I'm not afraid anymore." I nodded. Me neither. We kept driving, the sun setting ahead of us, turning the sky gold and pink. For the first time in months, it felt like the world was right again. Looking back now, I realized that sometimes the moments that break you are the same ones that rebuild you. That night in the Uber started as fear, but ended as grace. It reminded me that life isn't measured by how long it lasts, but by how deeply we live it. So if you're watching this and it made you feel something, remember this. No matter how dark things get, there's always someone, somewhere, trying to help you find your way back to the light. Make sure to subscribe for more stories like this, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And always, always cherish the people who choose to stay when everything else falls apart.